Hello, welcome and thank you for joining us today on this webinar where we will be discussing the theme of education for sustainable development. I'm Sharon Parkinson. I'm a Publishing Development Manager and co-host representing Emerald Publishing. So this webinar has been developed in partnership between the International Higher Education Teaching and Learning Association, or HETL as it's more commonly known, and Emerald Publishing. So to find out more about either of these organisations, please look out for a follow-up email after the event. There'll be links through there to resources and to information. A few housekeeping and practical points before we start. So all delegates are muted. So if you do have any questions, which we encourage, please use the questions box in the panel to the right-hand side of your screen. We'll try and address all the questions at the end of the session. If you have a question that's for a specific panelist, then can you please be sure to just type their name as well before your question so that we know who to direct the question to. Chairing the session today is Madhasu Bhaskara Rao, who is a professor in human resource management and organisational behaviour. He's based at the ICFAI Business School in Hyderabad, India, and he's also a HETL country director for India. So I'll hand over to you now, Professor Rao. Sorry, Professor Rao, I think you're on mute.
Thank you, Sharon. It's wonderful to have this webinar. Welcome all the participants to the webinar. The content of today's session focuses on education for sustainable development. The UN Sustainable Development Goal Target 4.7 states that by 2030, all learners will acquire the knowledge and skills needed to promote sustainable development, including, among others, through education for sustainable development and sustainable lifestyles, human rights, gender equality, promotion of a culture of peace and non-violence, global citizenship, appreciation of cultural diversity, and culture's contribution to sustainable development. Education for sustainable development, or ESD as it is commonly known, is an interdisciplinary approach to learning that covers the integrated social, environmental, and economic dimensions of the formal and informal curriculum and enables people to develop the knowledge, values, and skills to participate in decisions about the way we do things individually and collectively, both locally and globally, that will improve the quality of life now without damaging the planet for the future. I'm joined by 4 panelists today to explore how education institutions worldwide approach ESD and hear about different strategies and challenges. Our panelists are based in 4 different countries, covering 3 different continents. So I'm sure we will get rich and varied views and experiences throughout this session. Now let me introduce our panelists. Our panelist, Professor Mirela Panait. She currently holds the position of PhD professor in the Faculty of Economic Sciences at the Petroleum-Gas University, Ploiesti in Romania. Mirela is also a scientific researcher at the Institute of National Economy and PhD advisor at Doctoral School of Romanian Academy. We have Dr. Gisele Arruda, is a professor in circumpolar studies in the polar connection. She is a member of UArctic. She has studied 2 PhDs and is an expert in climate change science and governance, sustainable energy systems, and environment and society. Dr. Sweta Patnaik, our 3rd panelist, is a senior lecturer, teaching and learning coordinator, and curriculum officer in the Department of Clothing and Textile Technology, Faculty of Engineering and Built Environment at Peninsula University of Technology, Cape Town. The 4th panelist is Dr. Carol O'Donnell. She is Douglas M. Lap and Annie B. Kaiser Director of the Smithsonian Science Education Center, which is dedicated to transforming K-12 education through science in collaboration with communities across the globe. Thank you all the panelists for joining today's webinar. Without much ado, I think we will start the discussion. Let me first start with Dr. O'Donnell. Starting with you, can you please talk about the project that you have been involved in and share some of your observations or findings with reference to the implementation of ESD? Over to Dr. O'Donnell.
So, hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. My name is Carol O'Donnell, and I'm, as you mentioned, the director of what's called the Smithsonian Science Education Center. And we are an organization that focuses on K through 12 education, so primary and secondary school education. So my response is in the context of our youngest learners. I sit on what's called the Inter-Academy Partnerships Global Council for Science Education. So there are national academies of sciences, engineering, and medicine across the globe, of course, who focus on science, engineering, policy, medicine, but they're also committed to science education for our youngest learners. And in 2016, when Zika, mosquito-borne disease, was very prevalent at the time, the question became for the council, what could we do to educate our youngest learners on very complex issues that are not just scientific, but are socio-scientific and also require engineering skills in order to basically solve those problems, but on a local scale. So the Smithsonian Institution, through the Smithsonian Science Education Center, in collaboration with the Inter-Academy Partnership, in 2016, launched a project that was based on how to educate youth on the underlying issues within the UN Sustainable Development Goals, including mosquito-borne diseases, biodiversity, climate change, how to create more sustainable communities, etc. So to date, the project, which we call Smithsonian Science for Global Goals, in collaboration with its accompanying network, the Network for Emergent Socio-Scientific Thinking, or NEST, pulled together the idea that we could educate our youngest learners on these very complex topics to be able to prepare them for the future, whether it's going off into higher education to study ESD or sustainable development topics, or whether it was to go directly into the workforce or just to become a more sustainably minded citizen. So to date, we've developed 13 of our 19 community research guides for youth to help educate them on the most complex socio-scientific issues of our time. As I mentioned, whether climate action, climate resilience, water, clean energy, etc. These guides have to date reached 6.7 million students through the 50,000 educators that we've trained in collaboration with educational community partners across 118 countries. So I just want to say that what we're doing in K through 12 education is trying to prepare our youngest learners to be ready for when they go off for college or career or life, to think more sustainably, to have more sustainable mindsets.
Thank you, Dr. Donnell. Now let me go to Professor Gisele Arruda. Have you been involved in any such projects as Dr. Carol? And can you tell us broadly your own experiences in integrating curriculum or teaching methods in the ESD space?
Very much for having me. It's an important talk. I'm essentially an interdisciplinary researcher with 33 years of experience. I belong to the University of the Arctic, and my focus is on natural resources, climate change adaptation, energy systems, and education for sustainable development. In the last 10 years, I have been involved in research projects, and I developed an anthropological, sociological viewpoint about the concept of sustainable development and about, consequently, education for sustainable development, as my work focused on indigenous and non-indigenous education contexts related to natural resources extraction in different geographies, Arctic and non-Arctic world. by exploring features and comparisons between indigenous and non-indigenous education in relation to the concept of sustainable development and curriculum adherence to sustainable development. So these studies generated papers and important books like Sustainable Energy Education in the Arctic, that essentially is about sustainable development literacy focused on climate change and energy literacy, and the role of higher education in this important sustainability awareness. Another important work was Corporate Social Responsibility in the Arctic, so new frontiers for understanding management, business responsibility, social responsibility in terms of the local population. Other studies were sustainability education for global citizenship and social sciences, the development of Greenlandic higher education system, and climate adaptation and green investment, where I, in the last chapter, discuss about the importance of climate change literacy. These studies present main concepts informed by underpinning theories that provided an interactive and integrative foundation for the thinking behind these studies and for the models designed and derived from the specific data collected in several different Arctic countries. Complexity theory linked to global citizenship theory, constructivism, and sustainable development theory are all outlined and were innovated in certain respects. This is an analogy representative of a current triple bottom line static model that currently is very limited to these three pillars: economic, social, and environmental. And in my study, it proved to be insufficient, as the real world interactions are highly more dynamic, complex, and interdependent, intricate, and difficult to understand and disseminate as knowledge than the siloed disciplines and rhetoric can provide. It also generated a new analytical model of education for sustainable development in terms of parameters. How do you measure the adherence of your projects to ESD? The knowledge derived from complexity has power because it allows the construction of alternative futures, and by recognizing that different people have different personal, social, cultural constructions of reality and in relation to sustainable development. The concepts are different, considering different groups, populational groups. So, and the first step to understand, interpret these realities, to envisage alternative paths and apply this knowledge to education to better equip students. So these different knowledge systems were studied, compared, and I could say that the data collected showed that indigenous lecturers understand the concept of sustainable development through an integrative approach, a systemic multidisciplinary approach, by discussing geobiophysical, social, environmental, and climatic effects, and linking them to knowledge creation in the benefit of communities. They recognize the importance of educating the youth about these changes, equipping them to understand these changes by establishing their role in the process of promoting knowledge creation, dissemination, and adequate local adaptation to the ongoing changes through the nurture of multiple skills. Indigenous educators focus on society, on local communities, looking at issues under local, regional, and global perspectives, a more holistic viewpoint. They see education for sustainable development as a tool to empowering indigenous youth to bring their livelihoods and culture to the future. So basically, this work innovated the triple bottom line, including other two pillars, the geographical and cultural pillars.
Thank you, Gisele. I think we have given a very elaborate, presented your elaborate research work. Thank you very much for sharing it. Now let's go to Sweta Patnaik. She comes from a different region altogether, where the need for the sustainable development is all the more felt. We would like to hear from you what's your experience in South Africa and your own experience of doing some research in this area.
Greetings, everyone. Thank you very much for the opportunity. So mine is very hands-on, actually. I do lecture students as an academic, so I feel students' engagement with community, with SMMEs, brings about a lot of knowledge, brings about a lot of learning, other than just doing research. So as much as my colleagues have highlighted of the importance of sustainable development, the same applies in the field of engineering that I am in. And it's also about preparing students, not just for the world of work, but for the world of uncertainty. With the pace at which technology and innovation is progressing, there might be a time where things might come to a standstill because it's all about technology. And I would then be responsible to ensure as an academic that my students have the right skills to sustain themselves. And that is what sustainable development is about. How do we as human beings sustain ourselves in times of need? So my work in my discipline is more around preparing students. It's about touching base on aspects around sustainable development, majorly around waste management. It is important coming from the clothing and textile industry that how much of landfill happens every time we are buying clothes for even for occasion or casually due to impulse buying. So the project involves cross-disciplinary integration. There is engagement of students with communities. They're expected to gather feedback and understand real life problems and then draw projects and products based on that. So I think there is a lot of need for active learning and co-creation of students along with community and academics as much as the technology comes into picture. And a huge amount of partnership collaboration needs to come into picture with academia and industries as well as communities. So I'll pause for now if there isn't anything more. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think that takes us to Mirela. She has been doing a lot of work, publishing a lot of papers in the area of education for sustainable development. And your experience in Romania will be very, very unique for us to get a few points for taking away. Please share your thoughts on what you have been doing in the ESD space. Thank you very much.
Hello everybody. I'm working at Technical University. The name of university is Petroleum-Gas University, and I will share with you some of our main project in sustainable development because I consider that universities have many tools in order to promote education for sustainable development, and the power of example is very important in this field. We notice that many universities around the world has transformed their campuses into models of sustainability by adopting green energy sources, recycling or reducing waste, conserving water, or building or having efficient buildings. Such changes have not only helped to reduce their own environmental impact, but also it is an example of what can be achieved in urban and institutional settings. Even my university is focused on petroleum and gas field. We try to be greener and greener, and we just implement an important project financed by European Union. And for our campus, we use geothermal energy. And in this way, we try to become carbon neutral institutions. and we try to showcase that these green energies are feasible for large organization and of course for urban environments. In addition, we established new programs for our students in renewable energy studies, and in this way we try to share knowledge and information about energy transitions with our students. These are the main examples from my university. So seems to have a different experience being from different countries and different institutions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mirela. I think very, very interesting perspectives all of you have brought in. I know we do follow some of these things in India too, where I'm located. But you know, the younger generation, particularly when they come into the college education and all, it's very, very difficult to change their mindset in terms of adopting some of these sustainable development practices. So there's always an argument between when to start. Should it be started at the high school level or the university level? So we see a lot of resistance, a lot of challenges in this. And Carol is doing something at the K-12 level. I think it will be very interesting to know how you actually see these challenges and what are the resistance that you see and how do you overcome them. Can you please share with us?
Yes, absolutely. And I really appreciate the comments from the previous panelists, because one of the things that we have to do educating our youngest students is make certain that they're ready for all of you, whether it's in the workforce or whether it's at the university level. So one of the questions we asked was, how are schools integrating sustainability topics into their secondary science teaching? So this is for ages 11 to 18 in particular. And as I mentioned, those topics range, as science educators would think about, from clean energy to biodiversity to climate action and sustainable communities, et cetera. So what we did was we worked with Gallup, who conducts surveys not only in the United States, but across the globe. And they have access to what are called teacher panels. So these are teachers of students from ages 5 to 18. So we asked that question, and last year we released the first of 2 reports in which we're trying to understand what are the needs of teachers and what can we do as educators to support these youngest students to advance educating, we say educating for sustainable development instead of education for sustainable development. And that report, which I can share the link in the chat, but there were 3 key findings last year. So last year we went to 5 countries and 5 different continents to better understand how they're educating their students for sustainable development. And what we found, unfortunately, was that teachers in the United States, their perspectives are that this is not part of their teaching. And yet in countries such as India, Brazil, Canada, France, they are much more likely to be integrating education for sustainable development into their teaching of their youngest students, 3 times more likely than the teachers in the United States. The second was that when we disaggregated the data by the topics that are in the UN Sustainable Development Goals, the teachers across the US are much less likely to be teaching these topics than teachers in Brazil or India or France. Canada and the US, which are very decentralized educational systems, we don't have a Ministry of Education telling schools what to teach. So it's very hard to make change happen in complex educational systems that are decentralized. So those topics are just not on the radar of teachers. And then finally, when we ask teachers across the globe, do you think this is important to educate students for sustainable development? It didn't matter what country they lived in, they thought it was important. And so that was the good news, that even in the United States where they're not teaching it, they do believe it's incredibly important to connect students to their local community, as we heard from Professor Arruda, to make certain that they're tackling complex topics, as we heard from Professor Panait, and that they are absolutely able to use this knowledge to improve their communities. And so that's the good news. This year, we engaged Gallup in a second survey to better understand what was happening in the United States. And so I look forward to, in the next question that you'll ask, to be able to address what is it that we're doing here and that any educator can do to bring sustainable development into their teaching, even if it may not be part of their curriculum or their mandates by their country.
Thank you. Awesome. I think it's very interesting to see the findings of the first survey, and we really look forward for learning about the outcomes of the second survey. I think there's a reality, and the aspirational gap is very, very clear. Thank you so much for sharing it. I think we will now take Professor Arruda. How do you actually see the challenges in implementing the ESD at the university level?
I think education for sustainable development is a vision of education based on important premises of compatibility of the human needs to the natural capacity of the planet, and solidarity, inspiring the notion of citizenship. But these are premises that vary according to cultural and economic backgrounds. ESD is also essentially contested territory and open to various interpretations following the same controversies of the concept of sustainable development, and not an educational mainstream because of the same difficulty of providing the practical balance between economic, environmental, and human aspects. Some nations are more focused on different pillars, and this is the problem. So my studies indicated that it's not possible to provide welfare and freedom without understanding what sustainable is from different perspectives and exercising the concept in practice. So what I really find quite important is the application, not theorization only, but application. So it would be important to integrate sustainability into the curricula even more. To provide climate change and energy literacy education, sustainable development literacy education at all levels, not only higher education, at all levels. And this is what my studies from the Greenlandic education system showed me. So they have a completely different system there, and all levels of education have this adherence to ESD. So we needed to reduce inequalities, we need to enhance multiculturalism, and this has to do with international students, not only Arctic non-indigenous and indigenous. I'm talking about international students because I teach them from all over the world. So all of this applies to international students. Access to basic resources is very important in parts of in developing countries. So they needed to have the resources to access all of these important elements as well. And we need more teacher training programs, lecturers, not only students. I think we needed to develop training programs at all levels as well, because we needed to equip better politicians, better scientists, better teachers, not only students. I think everyone has a role in this process of change.
Wonderful, awesome. I think a lot of training is what you're recommending, and we will come back to that point. I think, Sweta, what are the challenges that you see in your context in terms of implementing ESD?
I think the most critical challenge, if I can mention, is around the lack of systematic integration into mainstream education systems. So while these topics as sustainability is what it is increasingly seen that it's siloed in the curricula as a separate subject. However, it should be holistically integrated into the curriculums, into different subjects. It should not be fragmented. It should be a part of economics. It should be a part of humanities. It should be a part of science. And that is where the interconnection is lacking. What I also see as barriers is obviously policies around curriculum, policies around curriculum rigidness, when I say, because when we have national educational policies, they prioritize traditional subjects and standardized testing systems. So there isn't any window for EST. So it's almost like a forcible inclusion to the curriculum. That is where policies needs to be specifically drawn to ensure that inclusion of EST is a must. I think the previous panelist already mentioned about insufficiency in teacher training, which is also a necessity. I think there's a huge gap between that. Obviously, there's a huge gap in terms of new academics entering into the curriculum over existing academics who have been conditioned for years, or I won't say existing, but I think unwilling academics who haven't had interest or aren't having an interest of going through this training process. So that is where a gap comes in, because if they are not well educated and trained, what they are bringing into the future generation is going to really make a lot of difference. Then there is a barrier around funding and resources. Now, implementation of EST does require investments in materials, sometimes technology and support systems. Especially in low-income areas or developing countries, it's a must, which we see government-wise or understanding the economy of respective countries, it becomes a challenge. And lastly, again, I think the cultural side has been mentioned, but there is also a bit of political resistance around the urgency of sustainability issues. It becomes more politically convenient for leaders to speak and mention what works for them politically, and they follow that path over what is the real need of the planet and the environment. Thank you.
Thank you. I think you've been very, very specific in terms of what needs to be done. The paradox is the low-income countries need more investment. Unfortunately, they can't do the investment. That's the paradox there. Thank you so much for sharing the perspective. Mirela, what are your challenges in Romania? How do you experience these challenges there?
We consider that sustainable development is a challenging process because we must assess different issues like climate change or preserving biodiversity or sustainable consumption or poverty reduction, and we think that the solution can be curricular mapping for societal impact in order to align educational goals, content of different disciplines and assessment method with the aim of preparing students to contribute positively to society. So we try to improve their attitude and behaviors to promote social responsibility and civic engagement. And we think in this process, it's important to align educational objectives with societal needs. To identify gaps, another issue is to foster interdisciplinary collaboration, promote continuous improvement, and I think it's important connections with local communities, with companies and public authorities that can support us in this journey to sustainable development. These are our idea.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I think all of us have similar experiences. Fortunately for us in our university, we integrate a lot of sustainability SDG goals into the regular curriculum. That is what our experience is. But I think from the K-12 education, you have a very, I mean, you are a sort of, we take the students from where you leave them. What are the innovative things or strategies that you suggest that you follow in promoting the sustainable development goals at that level? Can we take your perspectives, Dr. Carol?
Yes, absolutely. So as our 2023 Smithsonian Gallup survey showed, your previous question, like the biggest barriers where teachers don't have the time, they don't have the resources, they don't have the expertise, and they also don't have access to experts who understand education for sustainable development, which means that in order to advance ESD in the primary and secondary schools, we have to provide, as Professor Arruda alluded to, we have to provide teachers with the resources such as the Smithsonian Science for Global Goals guides, all free, the expertise such as professional development for teachers or networking opportunities with scientists and professionals in other fields, such as our Network for Emerging Socio-Scientific Thinking. And we also have to provide them with the knowledge. So one thing that we learned from the Smithsonian Gallup second survey that was conducted this year was that science education is often focused on the cognitive domain of learning the natural sciences. And that to integrate ESD into your teaching of science, that's my focus. It could be any topic, but into the teaching of science, the teachers need to integrate also the social domain of learning. And we heard a lot of that already. In other words, connecting students' learning to their local community's needs, as well as the behavioral domain of learning. And we learned this from UNESCO. So this is UNESCO's learning framework, cognitive, social, behavioral domains of learning. In other words, by helping students act, to use their cognitive knowledge, their social knowledge, to be able to advance action within their local community that improves their local community's needs. So we believe that if professional learning for educators helped educators think about how to integrate the cognitive, social, and behavioral domain of learning, that even if the policies within their country didn't exist, or state in our case, didn't exist to advance ESD, that teachers could still take the cognitive domain of learning and integrate that local place-based learning opportunity and those actions to help students understand how to improve their knowledge, improve their local communities using their scientific or social knowledge. So that's our approach to this. And then I would also say one of the other opportunities is that we move away from simply teaching Westernized perspectives of scientific knowledge and also integrate, as we heard from the other panelists, this localized, indigenous, traditional knowledge so that students have the ability to see science from multiple perspectives, as we've heard, from not only an environmental or social perspective, but also a cultural perspective, a local place-based perspective, as well as, of course, economic, social. So there are many things that we can do, tips that we can provide to teachers through professional learning that would allow them to integrate ESD into their teaching.
Thank you. I think you've given very, very practical, implementable solutions, and that is sort of government neutral. The teachers themselves can do something if they want to contribute to the society. Now, let me go to Sweta again, and what kind of innovations or strategies that you have implemented in your university for advancing the sustainable development?
Okay. Look, first, as the curriculum officer of my department, I have made sure that as a team we design curricula that incorporate sustainability, and not just as a subject, but it is across disciplines, and that it is well integrated. Secondly, the most important thing was around integration of subjects, that students understand working together across different subjects, merged together, working towards one common outcome or goal from a project that is integrated across subjects was another such approach. Ensuring that there is some partnership across, like we enforce on the quintuple helix model, ensuring that we have partners across different platforms to ensure that they are working together. I felt also we cannot go away from the fact of technology, but also ensuring that we use the right digital tools and the right e-learning platforms where we can bring in academics to a place or situation where they can enhance their skills and knowledge necessary for ESD. And at the same time, making sure that we have context-specific approaches. That just helps in addressing to the indigenousness of a particular locality, and at the same time addressing to community-based solutions, to the point that if I can say that at this point, in the past 2 years, we have been carrying on sustainability projects, which have in the past 2 years won awards across global platforms around sustainability and how do we incorporate entrepreneurship as part of ESD and preparing future citizens. I won't say professionals, but rather future citizens. So those were some of the steps that I feel is working well. The creation of technopreneur hub or an incubator, it wasn't that we didn't have, I think we had it. It was just streamlining it to give it a complete look that this is what an incubator could look like and this is how incubation could happen with the minimum cost available and still be able to be financially sustainable. So those were some of the steps that have been ongoing in the institution for the past few years, specifically in the department.
Thank you. I think very, very interesting initiatives. Professor Mirela, what kind of initiatives or strategies that we've used in your university to promote ESD?
Yes, in Romania, universities have similar strategies in order to promote education for sustainable development. And these strategies has 4 pillars. The first pillar is to provide faculty support and training for teachers. This includes workshops, seminar, and resources on the best practices. The second pillar is monitor and evaluate in order to update the curriculum map to be sure it remains relevant and effective. And in this regard, feedback from students, faculty members, and community partners are used. The third pillar is community and global partnerships. And all universities have good collaboration with local non-governmental organization and different companies. And the fourth pillar is reporting and accountability. Annual reports are disclosure in order to prove our environmental impact and our project. So like in corporate world, it's a good strategy that all stakeholders are aware about our project and our results regarding promotion of sustainable development.
Thank you. I think they are very, very important points, particularly the partnerships are very, very important. Now, let's go to Professor Arruda. What kinds of initiatives are the successful strategies that you have experienced in promoting ESD?
I think the creation of multicultural educational spaces where multicultural students can feel safe and comfortable to be who they are and express their opinions according to their personal and collective experiences depends on this pragmatic implementation of a more multidisciplinary, multicultural perspectives that I mentioned before, inserted into the curriculum. And based on the best levels of sustainable development literacy. So these are very dynamic, interconnected aspects that need to be considered altogether, not in a siloed way. So these skills, I believe that they should be exercised in the real world, and it's not only nurtured in the academy, in the schools, but also in the community. I think the community is a big lab of application, of knowledge application. The management of natural resources and the intergenerational dimension are part of this culture, and they are not seen as standard provisions of sustainable development concept only, or diplomatic elements of international treaties. This needs to be applied into practice. So communities should be the end users of knowledge, this knowledge that is created in the university, and the courses should have a theoretical component, but a practice is the purpose of study. And learning experience applied into real world problems. I think this is what I advocate for, and this is what I have been practicing.
Thank you so much. I think you said it. The community should be the beneficiaries and the users of the knowledge, not the employers alone. That is the fundamental thing that you have. The change in the mindset is required. Today, we think the higher education is offered only for the sake of the corporate world and not the community. That's a very interesting perspective. So we will move to the final round. You know, we have to keep an eye on the clock, and all of you, we have got a lot of people in the audience, particularly the educators who are there and would like to carry some practical tips back home, the takeaways which they can implement. So I would request each one of you just say a couple of points which each of our participants can make a note and take away from this very important seminar. So please share any actionable ideas or a few words that people can go back and implement in their respective universities, schools, and colleges from your experience. Just in 1 minute, you sum up from your experience what they need to take away from this webinar. Let's start with Sweta first, then we will go to Mirela, then Dr. Carol, and then finally to Professor Arruda.
Okay, thank you. I think one of the key takeaways that I can say would be that as educators, we need to promote sustainability by incorporating real life examples to ensure that the environmental and social issues are addressed in their lessons or topics that are being taught, which become very tangible for students. We have to ensure that there is project-based learning that addresses local sustainability challenges that can engage students in hands-on problem solving. And also encouraging eco-friendly practices in the classroom, such as reducing waste, conserving energy, and fostering sustainability are some of the key takeaways that I feel at this stage. And lastly, ensuring that students involve communities to encourage them in leading these initiatives, which sort of empowers them and gives them that power of ownership that can be used in their daily lives. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Over to Mirela.
I consider the stakeholder engagement is the most important issue in order to have education for sustainable development. For example, at my classes, I have different guests. I invite different guests from oil and gas companies. And they present real activities, real results from real companies to my students. Even this information are public disclosure by non-financial reports. It is better to have some guests and students interact with specialists from different departments of oil and gas companies. And I think the second issue, another important issue, is partnership with public authorities. And I think another important issue is internationalization of education, because foreign students and foreign teachers share their knowledge and their information with us. I think these are the main issues.
Wonderful, wonderful, awesome. Dr. Carol?
I would say in summary that this idea of helping students discover, understand, and act on local issues to make local decisions, engage in local action taking. And that is based on that idea of cognitive, social, social behavioral domains. The second I would say is that as a science educator and students, what we're trying to do is prepare students for the future. So we often hear people talk about STEM, science, technology, engineering, math, and the STEM workforce, but that workforce is shifting. It's becoming much more blue and green and sustainable. And so if we're going to prepare our students for the future, we have to make certain that they are ready for jobs that will be protecting our biodiversity, will be ensuring our ecosystem's health, will be reducing energy consumption, ensuring clean water, reducing materials consumption. We have to give students those skills today to make certain that they're ready 5, 10, 15 years from now. And I would definitely say that integrating community-based learning, which is built around a framework of discovering, understanding, and acting on this localized knowledge, is crucial to solve some of these complex global issues that ESD requires.
Thank you so much. Professor Arruda?
Thank you. The basic premise of sustainable development literacy is that human and natural systems are dynamically interdependent and cannot be considered in isolation in order to resolve critical issues, societal issues, through the application of process-based tools capable of managing unexpected change. As the geographical and cultural aspects are also relevant to define models of development, they seem to be equally important to define levels of sustainable development literacy. So this is a dynamic construction, a long time, a constant adaptation process in relation to education. So education is under this constant adaptation process. So these perspectives, different perspectives, indicate the importance of teaching skills or developing complex thinking by adopting a system approach, so systems thinking, when covering the course content to stimulate an extended understanding or a holistic perspective of these interconnected components that go beyond economic, social, environmental, but also understand geographical, so local knowledge, and cultural interconnections. So this is a challenge embraced by education researchers, envisaging the future of a 21st century knowledge based on this counterintuitive sense of the planet as a place with its physical and social interactions.
Awesome. I think all of you have given fantastic insights in terms of how to go about implementing the ESD and what are the challenges, resistances, and we have a very well, structured panel, the K-12, and then the movement to the university or the higher education and the challenges faced there. I know this is a very complex and a diverse topic, and it requires a lot more time for discussion, but then we have what this time is given to us. And given the limited time, the kind of perspectives that one can carry for take away from the seminar, excellent, and thank you very much. I think we will now go over, I'm sure there are some questions. Over to Sharon for the questions posed by the attendees. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So there's been quite a lot of questions, and obviously we've got 5 minutes left, so I doubt that we'll get through all of them. So I'm just going to pick out some that I think have more broad appeal, perhaps. There's quite a few questions on the theme of equity and then things like Indigenous communities. So the first question is, what factor does equity play on sustainability education? So I'm not sure who would like to take that question. Carol.
So I'll just quickly say that in order to develop students' sustainability mindsets, we have to make certain that we're not just focusing on the scientific knowledge, as we've heard, it's multiple perspectives, and developing their scientific literacy, but that we're also developing their perspectives or mindsets around equity and justice, so that recognizing that what we do affects all people in different ways in different communities, as well as this idea of kind of open-mindedness and perspective taking, that we have to understand that these views are not just singularly solved by one perspective alone. So I think, Professor Arruda talked a lot about the importance of Indigenous knowledge, traditional knowledge. So helping students understand this and develop this equity and justice mindset is just as important as helping, and their open-mindedness mindset is just as important as developing their scientific literacy.
Thank you. Does anybody want to add anything onto that? Yes.
I think a lot has already been said in terms of inclusivity. What I feel could be added could be inclusive curriculum design, where we could focus on UDL, Universal Design for Learning, where it's about inclusivity, it's about giving equity and equal space across through different learning styles and through different offerings of assessments, designing different modalities or mode of deliveries. That would be one of the things to also give access to equity and at the same time ESD.
Mm-hmm. And Gisele, do you want to add something?
Yes, I think that we should try to humanize a bit more pedagogies and create socially engaged and responsive universities.
So the next question actually has been directed to you, Gisele, and it's about that Indigenous community piece. And are you aware, or has there been a survey conducted on Indigenous youth regarding their perceptions and experience with SDG that you're aware of?
Yes, I am. This is the theme of my second PhD. I conducted a vast study across the Arctic, Alaska, Canada, Norway, Greenland, showing precisely the differences between the concept of sustainable development. You cannot accomplish a concept that is understood differently by different people. You needed to understand their perspective in order to try to achieve targets and say that we are sustainable. It's not possible to achieve this abstract concept if you don't understand the different perspectives that different groups have about sustainable development. And I'll give you a very clear example. For the indigenous communities, the environment is not only a place where they extract resources, it's their home. It's the home where they have their cultural practices, their sacred spaces, their communion with nature, the preservation of resources for their for the 10th generation of their children. So this is their perspective. Our mindset does not apprehend this time, this time slot of 500 years, 7,000 years, like they do. So this is their perspective in very brief words. So yes, I conducted a survey in different Arctic locations with more than 1,000 indigenous peoples from America, from the US, Canada, Norway, and I studied in details the Greenlandic educational system and multicultural education there to understand precisely how different people see the concept of sustainable development. And the concept is completely different. This is in a book called Sustainable Energy Education in the Arctic, that is essentially collected data from lecturers and students, indigenous and non-indigenous, and provided a comparison between these views and the creation of an analytical model to understand the adherence of different programs to education for sustainable development.
Brilliant, thank you so much. We're actually at the top of the hour now, so we're going to have to draw a close to proceedings, and I'm afraid we won't have time to answer more questions. But Professor Rao, do you want to say a few closing remarks before we end the session?
Yes, thank you so much. It's really a pleasure and privilege to have this distinguished panelists in this hour today. Each one of them have given very, very useful, practical, is actionable points. I think, as Carol said, discover, understand, and implement is what she said. And I like this perspective of course, what Professor Gisele said. The geography, I think that is a new dimension that you've talked about. When we talk of ESD, we only talk about the 3 Ps, but then you also brought in a new alphabet into it, the G part of it, the indigenous part of it, the local part of it, which is, and you have articulated very well that each one understands sustainability in a very different way. So you cannot have one size fits all with a word which everybody understands differently. I think that's a very important takeaway for us. And Sweta has given from our experience in Africa as to what they are doing. I think what you are doing is from the university's point of view, from an engineering perspective, technical education perspective, is very, very useful. And Mirela, of course, you're working in a university where you are doing with petroleum, negative sides of the environment, and but then I think you are doing a lot of good things in terms of how to promote sustainability in your region. So wonderful having you all. It's my pleasure and privilege to have this conversation with you. Thank you, Sharon, for organizing this, and thank you all the participants. I'm sure all of you have something very useful to take away, and we hope to see you all again soon on another Emerald webinar very, very soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.